Okay, so chord inversions. In my What is a Chord video, I taught that a chord is commonly a triad. So here we have that C major triad, C major chord. What a triad is, it means that I have a root note. So in this case, I'll have C, and then I'll have a third above that. In this case, will be E, and then I'll have a third above that, which in this case would be G. So this is my C major triad chord. If you want to know about triads, if you want to understand major, minor, and all that, check out the video down below called What is a Chord? Okay, so now what happens if I take this C major chord, and I want to use these same notes, I still don't have a C major chord, but I want to rearrange some of the notes in a different order. Well, welcome to chord inversions. So when you have a triad, you can have two different inversions. So first you start off in root position, which is what you normally have. You have a 1, 3, and a 5. So there's our root position. You can have a first inversion, and you can also have a second inversion. Now before we get into this and start to understand these more, let's understand one really important topic, and that is that when we're inverting chords, we're not changing anything to do with major or minor. So here we have a C major chord. So if I go to my first inversion, that's still a C major chord in first inversion. If I go to my second inversion, it's a C major chord in second inversion. So it maintains that major throughout it. It's still major, it still uses the same notes. We're just rearranging the notes. And we are rearranging them in a specific way. So let's get into it. So as I was saying, in root position, you have a 1, you have a 3, and a 5. And just to quickly describe that one more time in case they didn't quick, that's because you have a root note, your 1. You go up to your 3, so this is your 1, 2, 3. And then you go up to your 5, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's why you have a 1, you have a 3, and then you have a 5. So since we take that root note C and we build a third above that to E, and then we take that E and we build a third above that to G, we have 2 thirds. So as you can see in this picture, I showed that between C and E, you have a third, and then between E and G, you have a third. When it's all stacked together, you have a 1, 3, and a 5. Over here in this box is what's called figured bass, and in root position, figured bass, you don't mark it. So figured bass is a whole nother video on its own, but I'm still going to show you how to identify and how to label for figured bass in first and second inversion towards the end of this video. Okay, so that was our root position. Now let's go to our first inversion. So since we are using these 3 notes, C, E, and G, what you do is you take this first note, your C, and you now put it on top of the E and the G. So let's see that one more time. I took my C, which was the root before. It started C, E, G. I'm taking that C, and now I'm putting it above the E and the G. And since these notes repeat, it's an easy way to think about it. If you can read your piano, you just remove the first C, and you go to your next C. So our first inversion, if you can see, it's already a little weird because as you can see, there's kind of a bigger gap in between G and C here. That's not a third, that's a 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a fourth. Okay, so between E and G, you still have that third because as you can see, it's basically like the second half of the chord we still have right here. We still have the E and the G. But now if we go from G to C, and even if you count G, A, B, C, that's 4 away, so G and C creates that fourth. In other words, instead of having a 1, 3, and 5, when we do a first inversion of a triad, now we have a 1, 3, and a 6. 1, 3, and 6. Because from that first note, you have a 1, 2, 3, and then from that first note, you have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. An easy way to comprehend that is that normally you have a 1, 3, and a 5, which is consisted of a third and another third. And now because we have a third and a fourth, you just think that it's a 1, 3, and a 6 because it's one bigger. And as you can see down here, it shows you basically the notes that you're playing, your 1, 3, and your 5, and then the notes in between that. So you have your C, D, E, F, and G. It helps when you say the chord notes loud and when you say the non-chord notes not as loud. Same thing with first and second inversion. Okay, so now let's refresh what we just did. So we just took a root position triad, and we just took this top note, and now we moved it on top of the chord. So now it is the highest note in the chord. So now if we want to do a second inversion, we're going to again take this beginning note, and we're going to put it on top of the chord. So as you can see, I just took that E from the beginning, now I placed it in the end, so it's on top of the chord. So as you can see with my second inversion triad, now I have a bigger gap in between my G and my C. And if you count, I have a 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I have a fourth there. And then from my C to my E, I have a third. So now instead of having a 1, 3, and a 5, I have a 1, 4, and 6. And remember, it's not a 1, 4, and 5, because I mean, you can see that on the piano right there. But if you think about it, I started from my 1, I went up to a 4th, and then I went up another 3rd. In other words, from that note, I'm going up 2 more notes. So when compared to that root note, my G, you can see I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 away from my G. And that's why I have a 1, 4, and a 6. Okay, so to conclude, if we have a C major triad, we have the notes C, E, and G. And that would be root position. And now if I want to do a first inversion, all I do is I take this first note, which is that C, and I put it on the end. So now I have an E, G, and C. Now back to root position. If I'm in root position and now I want a second inversion, all I'm going to do is take these first 2 notes and I'm going to place both of those on the end or on top of the G. Okay, here's a cool way to visualize this. I have my C, E, and my G written on 3 different cards. So putting together, here's my C major triad in root position. And if I want to take this C major triad in root position and I want to turn it into a first inversion triad, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the bottom note, in this case is a C, and I'm going to put it on top of the chord. So now I have an E, G, and C chord, making a first inversion C major triad. Then if I go back to the root position, now if I want a second inversion from here, from the root position state, all I do is I take the bottom 2 notes, in this case are C and E, I keep them in the same order, so C and E is in the same order still, and I have a G, C, and E. Pay attention, it's in the same order, so in the beginning I had C, E, G, and now I have G, C, E. That is second inversion. Okay, so now figured bass. This is going to be just a brief kind of intro to it. So as I was discussing, when you have your first inversion, you don't have a 1, 3, and a 5. You now have a 1, 3, and a 6. So to notate that in figured bass, because the difference between your root position and your first inversion is that 6th, you're going to notate in figured bass a 6. Okay, so now let's look over here. As you can see, I have that treble clef, so that's telling us we have our C note right here. So if you have a 6 below that, that is your figured bass telling you to play your first inversion. So 6 is telling you instead of playing a 1, 3, and 5, you're playing a 1, 3, and 6. Another way to look at that could be like your 6 is telling you not to play your 5 in a chord. So now if I read that I see the C note and I see a 6 below that, I'd be playing this. So as you can see, although my C is the notated note, it actually ends up being the last note. But that makes sense because the 6 is telling me to play a first inversion. So if you think about a first inversion C chord, you're just going to think E, G, and C. So then in terms of figured bass, if this had nothing written below that, that would just be telling you to play a root position. So now if you have a 4-6, that's going to be telling you to play your second inversion. So your G, C, and E. You read it 4-6 because you read it like a chord. So chords are going to be read up. So you're going to have your G, C, E chord. So you're going to have your 4 and your 6. You're going to have a root, a 4, and then a 6. And as you can see, that's what we have here. So as you can see again, my C is my notated note, but that's telling me to play a second inversion. So that's really telling me to play is G, C, E. That's it for this video. My next video is going to be chord inversions for 7th chords. And things start to get really interesting because when you have those 4 different notes, now you already have one more option with that. So now you have a 3rd inversion option. But also something interesting happens when you start inverting 7th chords. So be sure to check out that on my next video. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments. If you like this video, be sure to give this video a thumbs up so maybe more people could also find this video. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe. I will be posting a video at least once a week on music teaching topics. Thank you very much.